Holiday get-togethers are a great time to bring out your favorite party games, but not all party games are easy to teach or easy to convince people to play. My name's Joan, I'm your games mistress, and today we're going to be unpacking Codenames. Now this isn't a review, though it might help you to decide whether or not this game is for you, and it's not a tutorial either, though it will show you how to teach it to your friends. What it is a close look at what this game does, why it works, and how you can make the most of it when it's on your table. So let's get unpacking. Czech game designer Vlado Chvátil is a phenomenon. He began his career creating electronic games, but in 2006 he took the tabletop world by storm with the publication of Through the Ages, which revitalized grand historical simulation games and remains popular today among fans of heavy Euros. In 2009, the jury for the coveted Spiel des Jahres award, which is like the tabletop game equivalent to the Oscars, the jury created an award specifically for the newly released Space Alert, the New Worlds of Gaming Award, in recognition of how incredibly innovative its design was. To this day, Space Alert remains the only game ever to receive that award. Browsing through his ludography, Vlad's designs tend, for the most part, to be on the complicated side, with a lot of rules to learn. Fortunately, he's also a very skilled instructional designer, and he writes his own rulebooks. They're kind of famous, actually, not only for their remarkable ease of use, at least compared to most other rulebooks for comparatively heavy games, but also for their sense of humor and for the way that they draw the reader into the fictional world of the game. Vlad has also taken on the challenge of designing around the vast divide between those two types of players that I mentioned back in the Ink and Gold video. The ones who play mostly to engage with the game, and those who mostly play because they want to be entertained by the game. In other words, he's been creating party games that people like himself can actually enjoy. He started strong with Bunny Bunny Moose Moose, which is a goofy action game that directly calls out self-serious game players right there in the rulebook. He followed that up with Pictomania, which is a mechanically more complex take on Pictionary. It puts just as much emphasis on your skill at guessing as it does on drawing. I think the first title seems a little bit more directed toward the entertainment crowd, while the second one skews a bit more toward the engagement game enthusiast crowd, though both of them have some sneaky board game style complexity in them that might just make some party game fans feel a little bit suspicious, kind of like a kid being fed something that looks like it's supposed to be a treat, but might secretly be made of green vegetables or something. Then, in 2015, came the blockbuster, the game that would finally take home that SDJ Game of the Year award and secure Vlado Chvátil's place in game design history: Codenames. Now, the big question as far as this video is concerned is, does Codenames succeed in threading the needle between engagement players on one hand and entertainment players on the other? I'm kind of going to spoil the ending here and say it kind of does, but for a second let's talk about the subject matter. So, in theory, Codenames is a game about secret agents making contact with each other for some unspecified reason. And I say in theory because I've taught this game dozens of times to hundreds of players, and as far as I can tell, not a single one of them has ever actually engaged with it as a spy narrative. So, what is this game about? What's charades about? What's Balderdash about? What are most party games about? See, game enthusiasts often tend to be drawn to games that have a diegesis, a fictional world, where fictional things happen, things that can be interpreted as stories, if you'd like to look at them that way. They might be simple stories, like once upon a time in Atlantic City there was a really successful real estate mogul who drove all the competitors out of business. Or a more complex story, like once upon a time in the golden age of Araby there was a brave adventurer who traveled the world and overcame incredible perils and eventually became the Sultan of Baghdad. A good story can do a lot to draw players into a game, if it's a type of story that those players happen to be interested in. But people have very different tastes in stories, and if that's going to be your hook with a game, you're only going to be able to appeal to folks who are already pretty interested in that kind of story. If you're designing a niche game for a very particular audience, like, say, board game enthusiasts, that works just fine. On the other hand, party games have to appeal to a much wider audience. With most party games, you're going to need at least 6 players, preferably more, for it to be any fun, and in a group that large, there's a good chance that not everybody is going to like the same kinds of stories, so most party games avoid this problem by not being about anything in particular. If a game isn't about anything, then the subject matter won't put anybody off it. Seems as though Vlada couldn't help trying to have some kind of story in Codenames, but I'm going to tell you right now, your fellow players are just going to ignore it. And that's good. We're going to talk more later about how to get your players to buy in and get interested in playing, but for now, let's move on to the game itself. Codenames is a guess-the-word game, like charades or taboo, and like any good guess-the-word game, it's going to make things interesting by imposing some pretty serious restrictions on what you're allowed to do as far as providing clues for your teammates to make their guesses. In this case, each clue that you provide to your team is going to have to be a single word. But there's another twist here, because not only are you limited to clues of just one word, but you're going to be trying to pick just the right clue word to help your team guess not one, but hopefully 2 or 3 or even more words, while also avoiding guessing words that can score points for the other team or even lose you the game instantly.
Which word is it? Is it apples? Sweater? Towel? Water? Shoes?
Here's what you get in the box. You got a whole ton of these word cards. Pyramid, scuba diver, ruler, opera. The same word is printed twice on each card, once in black on a white background, and then again upside down in brown on a beige background. The idea is that players should be able to read the cards from either side of the table by training their eyes to look for one or the other type, and it actually works pretty well. There's also a little pile of 8 red cards, and a pile of 8 blue cards, and 7 gray ones. The red and blue cards have pictures of these cool secret agent looking people on them, and the gray ones have these derpy looking innocent bystanders on them. There's this one ominous card with a faceless dude in a trench coat, and that one's called the Assassin. And there's another card that's got a red spy on one side and a blue spy on the other. We've got a whole bunch of these square cards with red and blue grids on them. The game calls these key cards in the rulebook, but I'm going to call them grid cards because they got a grid on them. And you get a little plastic stand that's just the right size to fit one of them on it. Finally, you get a 90-second sand timer. To set up, just pick 25 of the word cards at random, take them and lay them out on the table in a 5x5 grid like this. Then get one of the grid cards and put it in a little stand, put the other little bits into piles. You're pretty much ready to go. The 2-sided red and blue card belongs to whichever team goes first, so if red's going first, put it red side up here, and if blue's going first, put it blue side up over here. Codenames is played in 2 teams, red team versus blue team. Each team has to have one leader, called the Spy Master in the rules, and at least one other person too, so you're going to need at least 4, preferably 6 or more players total, to get it to work. There are variants for 2 or 3 players, but we're going to cover those a bit later. The reason why you have to put this card on a little plastic stand is so that the 2 team leaders can see it, but their teammates can't. This usually involves a little bit of fussing around with the seating arrangements, but again, we'll get to that bit later. For now, just remember, only the 2 team leaders can see this card. Now, by both of them looking at it from the same direction, the 2 team leaders can see which words belong to which team. For example, if this is the card that you've got on the stand, that means that these words are for the red team, and these words are for the blue team. There's also one very ominous word with an X on it, the Assassin, which both teams are going to need to avoid if they want to win. The fact that they chose to make the Killer Assassin card black is, well, it's a choice, probably not a conscious choice, but yeah, that can be interesting to explain that sometimes, as you can imagine. Now remember, only the team leaders actually get to see this. As far as the rest of the players are concerned, these are all beige, and they're going to have to figure out which words are in their team's color using the clues provided by their leaders. Here's how it works. On the outside edges of the grid cards, there are these red marks. If they're red this time, that means that the red team is going first. If they're blue, that means the blue team's going to go first. This card has its marks in red, so we're going to have the red team go first, and we're going to put the double agent card red side up over here with the red cards. So the red leader looks at the grid card, looks at the words out on the table, and they try to think of a one-word clue that they can use to help their team to find some red cards, something that's related to those words in some way. Like, in this case, as the leader of the red team, I might say, dangerous, 3. That means my clue word is dangerous, and there are 3 words out there that I'm referring to. The other members of Team Red can talk it over, and when they're ready, they can start making guesses by touching the words one at a time. So if Team Red have talked it over and decided that scorpion is dangerous, one of them will reach out and touch the card. And then the team leaders will check the grid card to see what color the word is. If it's red, we'll put a red card on it like this, and then the red team can guess again. If it's blue or gray, we put a blue or a gray card on it to match, and then it's time for the blue team to have a turn. If it's the assassin, that's game over and the team who touched it loses. So when you're the team leader giving out the clues, you need to be very careful not to give a clue that could lead your teammates to pick the assassin word. And by the way, when you're the team leader, you're not allowed to give away information with your facial expressions or your body language. You have to stay poker-faced the entire time. So if a teammate is reaching toward the assassin card, you have to resist the impulse to go. So after the red team makes a wrong guess, or if they voluntarily decide that they want to stop guessing now, it is time for the blue leader to give a clue to the blue team. Again, it's going to be one word for the clue, and then a number telling their team how many of the words out there are related to that clue. Then the blue team can talk it over and start making guesses, and they keep guessing until they get one wrong, or until they decide to stop, and then it's back to the red team. First team to get all of their colored cards out there wins. Now, if your team went first, you will have one extra card you need to do, but hey, you went first, so that should even out. There are a few more fiddly sort of rules as well. You need to know these, but you probably won't need to explain them to the other players, at least not at first. First of all, there's a limit to how many guesses each team can try on any given turn, and that is whatever number their team leader just said, plus 1. Why would you ever want to try the extra guess? Well, supposing on the last turn you made a mistake and picked a wrong word, but now you realize, oh yeah, that's the word your leader must have been talking about. You can use that extra guess on a future turn to pick that one up. Then there are rules for what counts as an acceptable clue. It's mostly going to be common sense stuff, like you're not allowed to use any of the words that are actually showing on the table or any derivatives of those words. And you have to use clues to refer to the meanings of words. You can't use them to refer to how many letters they have or what letter they start with or anything like that. There's also rules for homonyms, proper nouns, and so on. Now, the rules for what is or is not an acceptable clue are divided into two sections: firm rules and flexible rules. The firm rules are always supposed to be used. The flexible ones you can be a bit looser with. The rulebook comes right out and actually tells you that you're going to have to make a judgment call about these things from time to time. And there's a bit to unpack there, but for now I'm going to say is that you probably want to start with a strict version, and maybe loosen things up later if it seems like it will help your group to enjoy the game more. Then there's the sand timer. Use of the sand timer is entirely optional and down to the preferences of the individual playgroup. The idea is that if somebody seems to be taking a long time to do something, then you can start the timer, and they have to do the thing before the time runs out. What happens if it runs out and they still haven't done the thing? The rules actually don't say, and maybe you're supposed to skip to the next turn or something. I expect that would feel pretty bad for whoever had to skip a turn because of it, but if it doesn't do anything, then it doesn't seem like there's much point. Here's how I interpret the timer. There will be times when you're the team leader and you can think of a clue that's okay, but you're pretty sure you could do better if you had a little more time, or maybe you've got a decent guess that you can make, but you're thinking you could do better if you had some more time to do it, but you don't want to hold the game up for too long. The timer can be a good way of saying, okay, if I can't think of anything better than what I've got now by the time the sand runs out of this glass, I'm just going to go with what I've got. That seems like the ideal use of it for me. If you've got a situation where somebody can't think of anything to do or guess, that's a bit tougher, and we're going to have to save that conversation for a bit later on. I've said it before, and it bears repeating, the single most important thing you need to do when teaching a game is to get the players to buy into it emotionally. If they're really into it, then none of the mistakes or hiccups that happen along the way are going to matter. They're just going to breeze right through it, no problem. But if they're uninterested, then every little hiccup is going to bring things to a grinding halt. It won't matter how good you are at teaching, it won't matter how good they are at games, it's just going to be a slog. So step one is always to convince everyone in the group that they're going to have a good time here. Now, unlike a lot of the games that I talk about here on the channel, Codenames is actually sort of known outside this little niche hobby of ours, and that can actually be a huge benefit. The average person, in my experience, needs like 10 times more effort if you want to convince them to buy into a game that they've never heard of. But if they have heard of it, they'll probably at least give it a chance without too much prompting. And if more than 2 of the people at your table already know it, you can probably bring in the rest with nothing more than a little peer pressure and maybe a little reminder that this is a team game and that it's okay to play in the same team with somebody who's already played and who knows it well. If they haven't heard of it, you're going to need to put in a little bit more effort. Don't try to use the spy angle, that's a dead end. It's no use with people who aren't interested in spy stuff, and as for the ones who are, you're just going to be making promises that the game can't keep. Somebody who goes in expecting espionage action and adventure is going to feel cheated when they play it and discover what it's actually about. Instead, what you want to do is sell it as a clever word-guessing game that you play in teams, like charades, but without the miming and acting. Make sure to tell them how popular it is, how it's sold hundreds of thousands of copies in over 30 languages worldwide. Most people will be more willing to try something that's new to them if they hear that it's popular. And even if you can only get some of the players interested, sometimes that's actually enough because this is a team game. And as long as you've got a couple of invested players on each team, that should be okay because their enthusiasm will usually be contagious. And once people get drawn in, they usually stay in. You can even let some of your party guests just sort of hang out and spectate in the background. There's a fair chance that they'll end up doing more than just watching before long. And it's easy to add new players, even in the middle of a game of Codenames. Now, let's talk about making teams. For the person teaching the game, the setup should actually begin before people have even started sitting down. Codenames is a game that involves a lot of skill and thinking. So if the teams are very uneven in terms of engagement, like if one team's very focused on the game and trying to play it well, while the other team is mostly on their phones and not really into it, it's going to fall flat. Again, if there's a couple of players on each side of the table who are engaging, putting in some effort, their teammates will be more willing to do the same. If you have a whole team made up entirely of unengaged players, though, you might as well just pack it in right now. So you might have to be a little dictatorial about who sits on which side of the table, but don't worry about that too much. One of the main sources of anxiety for new players is often the fear of making wrong decisions. So in a lot of cases, people will actually be relieved to have somebody telling them exactly what to do. You sit here, you sit there. Sometimes you'll have couples or siblings who want to be on the same team or want to be on opposite teams, and if you have something like that, you should usually let them do it. It could mean that they're starting to engage with the game if they're asking for stuff like that. Then there's the matter of picking team leaders for that crucial first game. Now, obviously, you're going to have to be the leader of one of the teams, and you're going to have to go first so you can be the one who shows the others how things work. For the other team leader, you should pick the player who you think will be best at Codenames. If there's somebody at the table who's actually played it before, definitely pick them. Just tell them, okay, sit here next to me. You're going to be the blue leader. I'm going to be the red leader. We here on this side of the table are going to be the red team. You over there on that side of the table, you're going to be the blue team. Now, while the other players are taking their seats and getting comfortable with their drinks or whatever, toss out a big pile of word cards into the middle of the table and tell the other players to count out 25 of them and lay them out in a 5x5 square in the middle of the table. I'm probably going to set them up with the black and on white text facing the far end of the table, which is fine because you and the other team leader can easily read the brown on beige text. Now, while they're doing that, you need to sort out the red, blue, and gray cards into little piles and put the assassin next to them. Now you're going to find 2 grid cards that have your team going first, and hold them in your hand without showing them, and put the red and blue card on top of the red pile. Don't explain this while you're doing it. The other players don't need to know, and the more extraneous information you give them, the harder it's going to be for them to focus on the things they actually need to pay attention to. Okay, you've got your team set up, you've got the board set up, hopefully you've got the players' attention. It's time to start I'm so good at this. It's time to start explaining. The basic idea of Codenames can be a bit hard to articulate in just a couple of sentences, so here's a script that I use. Okay, so we're the red team, you're the blue team, I'm the red team leader, here's the blue team leader. We on the red team are trying to find all the red words, you on the blue team are trying to find all the blue words. Then you put one of the 2 grid cards face up on the table, and you show it to everybody. See this card? It shows which words are which color. This row here means this row here. This column here means this column here. So that means this one and this one and this one are red, this one and this one are blue. Some of the words don't have a color, and they don't belong to either team. Now this one here with the big X on it, this one is called the assassin. You don't want to touch that one or you lose the game. Okay, you ready for the twist? Here we go. This card here, the one that shows which cards are which color, can only be seen by the 2 team leaders over here, and we're going to try and help our teammates to find the right words and avoid the assassin by giving clues. Now at this point, you need to check in on your players and see how they're doing. If they're nodding their heads and their eyes are focused, you've got them, things are good, you can move on. If their eyes are glazing over and they're looking confused, you might need to provide a bit more clarification. Something like, say, So there's like about a half a dozen red words out here and about a half a dozen blue words, but only the two of us, the team leaders, can actually see which ones are which color. And we're going to try and help our teammates to find the correct colored words by using special clues, which we have to do a certain way, which I'm just about to explain. You with me now? If some of the players still don't get it, you're probably going to have to move on and allow them to sort of pick up on it by watching their teammates. If most of them don't get it, or if there's an entire team who don't get it, you might need to pick a different game, and please, don't judge them harshly. Everything is complicated when you encounter it for the first time, and games can be really intimidating for new players. Just play something they already know how to play. Maybe you can introduce them to something new another time. Or maybe they're just not the kind of people who are comfortable with new things. That doesn't mean that they don't deserve to have fun, so be nice to them. Alright, take the second grid card, the one you set aside a minute ago, the one the other players haven't seen yet, and set it in a little plastic stand, and put it in place so that only you and the other team leader can see it. If everybody else has been following you okay so far, then you've only got one major obstacle left to get through that first game, and then one more for the start of the second game. Now it's time to explain how clues work. Now the red team's going to go first. As the red team leader, I'm going to give a clue to my team to help them guess red words. My clue has to be exactly one word, and since I can only give my team one clue per turn, I'm going to try and figure out a clue word that will help them to find at least 2 red words, preferably more. So if I look down here and I see that there's 3 red words that all have to do with animals, then I might say animals 3. If I see I've got 2 red words that have to do with money, then I might say money 2. And then my teammates are going to talk it over, they're going to look at the words out there, they're going to try and figure out which ones I could be trying to get them to guess. They can take as long as they want to decide, and then, when they're ready, one of them will reach out and touch one of the cards. Just one at a time, keep it simple. Touching a card means that you are committed to guessing that word. If you touch a red word, I'll put a red card on top of it, and then the red team gets to guess again. If you guess a blue or gray word, we'll put a gray or blue card on it, and it's time for the blue team's turn. If my team touches the assassin, that's game over and we lose, so my team can keep guessing until either they guess wrong or they don't feel like guessing anymore, and then it's over to the blue team. If this whole pile of red cards is gone, the red team wins. If that whole pile of blue cards is gone, the blue team wins. Got it? And hopefully they say yes, and it's time for you to take your first turn. Now, although you finished explaining the rules, you haven't yet finished explaining the game. A lot of the players are going to need to see it to get it, so your first turn is actually a really important part of your teach. And even though you're not explaining rules, you are showing them what it looks like to play and what they should be expecting. So if you take a really long time to try and find the perfect clue without talking to anyone, they will learn that this is a game about sitting around and waiting, which doesn't make a great impression. On the other hand, if you take a fairly quick glance at the board and come up with a fairly respectable clue that refers to 2 of your team's words, they will learn that it's okay to just throw something off the cuff, even if it's not perfect. Much better. I strongly recommend that you go for 2. If you do 1, the game might end up devolving into just everybody just trying for 1 word over and over, and that's not much fun. If you try for 3, you might need a long time to look at all the words and find something to connect them. I mean, if you can do it, fine, but don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good enough, you know? This game can be a bit draggy if you let it, so start strong with a fairly quick clue that finds 2 of your team's words, and don't worry too much about avoiding the other words on the grid, except for the assassin. Do make sure that your clue stays clear of that one. After you give your clue, watch what your team does. If they immediately start talking about your clue and throwing ideas back and forth about which words they should pick, you're good. Just sit back, enjoy the show. But if they seem hesitant, if they're not really sure what to do, a bit of repetition could help a lot. Repetition's a great instructional tool, so go right ahead. Remind your teammates that the number means that there's that many red words out there that have to do with your clue. Invite them to start talking it over with each other and tell them when they're ready to guess, one of them should reach out and touch the first card they want to try. While they're thinking it over, you might also want to invite the blue leader to check out the grid and start thinking about a clue for their team. That way, they'll have a little extra time, and as a bonus, you've taught the whole table that team leaders can do this during the other team's turns, which is good, because you want them to be doing that when they try their hand at being leaders themselves. At this point, you can also mention the bit about how they're not allowed to pick a clue word that is actually on one of the cards out here, or derivatives of any of those words. Nobody's going to be surprised to hear this. Most guess the word games are like that anyway, and it just makes sense. Don't go into detail about it yet, though, and don't go into the whole firm rules, flexible rules thing, at least not unless they're so engaged that you think they'll really find it interesting, in which case, yeah, sure, go for it. So your team's going to make their guesses, and maybe it'll go well, and maybe it'll go terribly, but either way, everybody's seen how the game works now, and so they're ready for the blue team to have a go. Tell a blue leader that 2 is usually a good number to try for, though it's great if you can manage the occasional 3 or 4. And this is the other key moment. If both leaders manage to come up with a clue for 2 or more words, and both teams manage to make at least one correct guess, you've got a game on your hands. Things will probably just coast on their own from then on, and the players will either enjoy it or not, depending on their own personal tastes, which are outside your control anyway. But if the blue team leader had to go for a clue to just one word, it's going to be tough for them to find anything except ones for the rest of the game. And sure, players might be understanding about it, they might be really nice, they might not even need you to tell them that the first time playing a new game is always way harder than when you're used to it. But games, much like people, don't get a second chance to make a first impression, and you might be facing an uphill battle if it hasn't got their interest by now. Oh, right. I almost forgot about the additional rule that says that your team can make a maximum number of guesses each turn equal to the number given by your team leader plus 1. And you should forget about that rule too. Doesn't sound fun, it sounds clunky. At least it does when you have to explain it, which is why you're not going to do that. What you're going to do is just let your friends play, and if it ever gets to a point where somebody wants to try to do another guess after their team has already gotten all the words that their leader is referring to for that turn, then you smile sweetly and tell them, yes, you can have one more, that's the max. And you won't even have to explain why there's a rule that lets you make more guesses than the number given with the clue, because they already knew why they wanted one more guess. They wouldn't have asked for it otherwise. Now, most party games aren't meant to be played just once at a sitting. You're expected to play a few times, and Codenames is no different. It's usually a reasonably short game, and if your group really enjoys their first play, they're definitely going to want to play again. They'll want to take turns being leader, or maybe shake up the teams. Remember, you can speed through the setup for your second game by just flipping all the 25 word cards face down. Boom, all new words, ready to go. This is the scenario you're hoping for. But if you end up with a situation where it's kind of borderline though, like they're sort of enjoying it but not quite all in, you might want to suggest a second go with the same teams and leaders. Or, if you realize that there's somebody else at the table who would be better suited to being the blue leader, you might want to bring them over to the chair next to you. The key is to make sure that the second play is better than the first one. And if you've got 2 fairly engaged leaders and a reasonably engaged group, that should happen. Almost everything gets easier with repetition. Now later on, if your group gets at least a little bit enthused, you can also add in the stuff about what is or isn't a valid word, and toward the end of the game, you could mention the flexible rules, which might get them interested about starting a second game after this, where hyphenated words and proper names and so on can be legal clues. This can be an especially good idea if they're feeling maybe a little frustrated with the strict rules for clues. They can sort of speed through the rest of the first game knowing that for them this doesn't count, this isn't the real version of the game rules for them, which will lower the emotional stakes and keep them from feeling bummed if they lose. Under conditions like that, they should be up for a second game, and maybe some of the people who didn't buy in earlier might sort of glance over at the table and think, that looks fun, maybe I'll join in. But if the group is just not feeling it, you might want to pack it in, even if you haven't finished the first game yet. Don't give them a hard time, and don't pull a guilt trip, because now you're teaching the group another important lesson, that it's okay to not like the same games you do.
What?
It's an important lesson, Seffi. Don't...
Yeah.
It teaches them that you care about their enjoyment of the time that you spend together. You can offer to bring out some other game if you think they would be receptive to that, or you can just admit defeat and let it go for the evening. Now I realize this sounds a bit downbeat, and I don't want to give the impression that I don't like Codenames. This copy here belongs to me, and there are good reasons why I keep it in my collection. But it can also be a polarizing game, because it's definitely not for everyone. Let's talk about why that is. So, what was it about Codenames that made it into a massive international hit? Out of all the attempts that we've seen to create a party game that won't bore the enthusiast to tears, why did this one get huge? Well, part of it has got to be down to that SDJ award. I mean, I wasn't kidding about how prestigious it is. It's like winning the Oscar for Best Picture. Only one game a year gets it, and that game always gets a huge print run that sells out in countries across Europe immediately after it gets announced as the winner. But the popularity of Codenames extends well outside the realm of that tiny group of people, mostly in Germany, who know what the letters SDJ stand for. So what else could it be? Well, there's Vladek Vatil's name on the box, but I imagine that there are even fewer people who've heard of him than have heard of the Spiel des Jahres award. You see, most of the time, I just don't think that there is a way to know for sure what the secret sauce is that makes for an unexpected runaway hit. If there were, some corporation would have figured it out by now, and they'd be using it to crank out runaway hits on an assembly line. I could talk about the challenge that the game offers to the team leaders, that fascinating puzzle of finding just the right word that your teammates will associate with these things, but not those things, which can be very satisfying. I could talk about the tense banter between teammates as they try to interpret the clues they've been given and figure out what their leader is trying to tell them, which is also really irritating. But the nugget at the center of all of that is this. Codenames is a party game that demands a lot of its players, just like a so-called strategy game, and I think that is both the secret to its success and the thing that you most need to be wary of when you're trying to use it to entertain your friends and family. See, game enthusiasts tend to really get into the games that we play, obviously, and most of those games can't be played solitaire, so we want the people in our lives to join us at the table, partly so that we can have somebody to play with whose company we actually enjoy, and partly so that we can share that joy with the people we like the most. The fun of sinking your teeth into a really satisfying challenge at the tabletop is just so special to us, and the freedom to fail at those challenges and still have a good time anyway is just so liberating. We want to be able to experience those moments together with the people in our lives. So we're constantly looking for titles that we can use to help the people that we love to step over that threshold and join us in those experiences that mean so much to us. That is the promise of this game. That is why we made Codenames a mega hit. Bunny Bunny Moose Moose was too weird and goofy to be that breakthrough hit. Pictomania was too obviously Pictionary for people like us. Players who aren't like us, they didn't want Pictionary for people like us, they wanted Pictionary. But Codenames was very much its own thing, even though it's still a word-guessing game, and they were really careful with its marketing and its visual design to not make it look too much like some kind of James Bond-style spy adventure game. With this colorful but generic appearance and a fairly low price point, it was able to sneak in under the radar without looking too suspiciously like one of those dreaded strategy games that put people off. Ultimately, the design of Codenames, and Vlad's other party game designs too, is at its heart a magician's trick. It's an act of misdirection, designed to give a certain kind of player a reason for committing to playing a type of game they would ordinarily never play. When it works, it can open up whole new worlds, introducing people to the unique and compelling joy of coming to grips with a tough challenge at the game table. It can even win people over who would have never bothered with that kind of game if it had a map and little wooden cubes and plastic figures on it. It's a special kind of magic when somebody plays Codenames for the first time and then says, "Wow, I didn't realize it could be so much fun playing a game where you really have to think about it." At least that's what happens when things go well. Unfortunately, not everyone is going to respond to it like that. Codenames is really clever, and with the right crowd, it's great fun. But you do need the right crowd, or rather, you need to avoid including the wrong crowd, which mostly comes in two flavors. First of all, there's people who just don't have the temperament for challenge. Codenames might look like a party game, and a lot of people do make the mistake of thinking party games are easier than other kinds. They're not, by the way, people just associate them with friendlier memories. So, sometimes all you need to do is trick them into trying it out, and before they know it, they're enjoying the challenge and having a great time. But not everyone is like that. North American society in particular has an absolutely huge stigma against being seen to try and fail at something, even something as innocuous as a game. And as a result, many North Americans are extremely timid about allowing themselves into situations where they have to put their skills on the line. It's different when it's someone else, of course. When we see somebody trying and failing in a movie or a TikTok or whatever, it's endearing. We root for them, we empathize with them, we cringe in sympathy with them. And unless they're doing something that's mean or destructive, we hardly ever judge them. I mean, okay, sure, jerks judge them, but screw jerks. We don't want them at the game table anyway. But when we make mistakes, we're often a lot more cruel to ourselves than we would be to anyone else in that situation, even strangers. So the idea of entering into a competition where we don't know the rules before we sit down, where we don't know what to expect or what we're going to be up against, can be terrifying. And no matter how many times you tell someone it's just a game, that terror and anxiety could be too much for some folks. Now, team games can be a good way of getting around that problem, provided that the teams are large enough and not everybody on any particular team suffers from that particular kind of anxiety. An anxious or timid player can just sit there quietly and let their teammates do most of the heavy lifting, and maybe once in a while they'll pipe up with an idea, and if they're right, they'll start to build their confidence. But put somebody like that in the team leader's chair and it's game over. Again, the fact that it lacks the signifiers of a strategy game, things like keeping track of points, or managing resources, or dice, or a game board with lots of little pieces, or the thematic elements that people associate with strategy games, like little plastic figures, or tokens representing money, or dragons, or spaceships, or whatever, that can help to ease tensions for people if their past experiences have left them feeling alienated from that kind of game. But for other players, those signifiers are the very thing that makes games fun and special for them. And that brings us to the second category of player who might not have a good time playing Codenames. If you're accustomed to modern tabletop games where you set about accomplishing a goal by making decisions, managing resources through tokens and rules and mechanisms, you probably expect your games to provide a clear structure, free from any ambiguity or murky judgment calls, and Codenames fails to provide that. It explicitly leaves it up to the players to decide what the exact rules are going to be, and even if they can easily come to a consensus on those, there's still going to be all these edge cases when it comes to whether or not a given word counts as a permissible clue, and there's no clear structure for arbitrating those cases. But wait, it gets worse. The structure that it does provide is... Well, here's how it looks from the point of view of a person who's used to playing enthusiast games. If you're the leader, you get 3 lists of words: your team color, their team color, and gray, plus 1 game-ending danger word. You find a clue that leads to the largest number of words on your list without hitting the other team or the danger word. Then you say that word out loud. And that's it. If you're not a team leader, there's even less than that. You just listen to the clue and point to the words associated with it, the end. From that point of view, there are no real decisions here. Either you can correctly identify the word to pick, or you can't. If you can, there's no decision to make. You just pick the correct one instead of a wrong one. And if you can't, the decisions are meaningless. Now, I know this sounds harsh, but this is actually the way this game can appear for people whose expectations don't fit with the kind of experience that it's designed to provide. Sometimes they just check out partway through because they don't see the point. And both of those two groups tend to have something in common with each other. When they're team leader, they rarely try to hit more than one word with a single clue. They'll just say feline, 1, breakfast, 1, dinosaur, 1. I mean, sometimes when you're getting towards the end of the round, there's just a few words left. It can be hard to find a clue that goes with more than 1, so you're stuck doing that for the last few turns. But a team leader who isn't willing to try for at least 2, at least some of the time, especially in those first couple of turns when there are lots of target words to go for, some of which are bound to have at least something in common, is pretty much guaranteed to make the game feel boring and pointless for everyone at the table, even the ones who actually like the game. If that starts happening, switch to a different leader immediately. Sure, it might make the outgoing leader feel bad, but believe me, if they're leading off with 1s, they already feel bad. Don't leave them twisting in the wind like that. Rescue them, get them out of there, and don't make them do it again unless they say they're up for it. There are a couple of other caveats here as well. Firstly, as with almost all party games, the language barrier can be a huge problem. Fortunately, this particular game is available in at least 38 languages, so as long as everybody at the table shares one of those, you're good to go. Secondly, there are, as always, people who think that all games are just a waste of their time. You're not going to convince them, not with this game, nor with any other, so don't bother. Just play, have fun, let them think whatever they want to think. And finally, there's the matter of player count. Codenames is at its best with 6 to 8 players. If you play with 4, all you've got is the 2 team leaders and 1 other person on each team, which means that if you're not a leader, you haven't got anybody to talk to about the clues that you've been getting, which takes away what is arguably one of the most fun parts of the whole game. It makes an already very quiet and contemplative game into a nearly silent one. Now, if you're okay with that, then go for it, but if you ever had any doubt before about the fact that this is not a party game, prepare to have it erased within the first 10 minutes. If you've got 5 players, that's 3 against 2, which is unfair at the best of times, but it's especially unpleasant here, because one of the teams has 2 people who can talk to each other about the clues they've received, and the other team doesn't. So not only does the larger team have a big advantage, they also get to have more fun. Not cool. 6 players is probably the sweet spot, and with 7 it's true that 3 heads are better than 2, but it's still a lot better than having 5 people. 8 players is probably the upper end, though you can go higher if some of the players in each team are very reserved. Otherwise you end up with too many people talking over each other as they argue about which word to pick in response to the latest clue. If you've got a larger gathering happening with a game taking place in the middle of it, you might want to let players just drop in and drop out from one round to the next so it doesn't get too unwieldy. And yes, there are also technically rules for 2 or 3 players, and they're fine, I guess. The way the 3-player version works is you've got the 2 team leaders competing against each other, and then you've got a third person who's not actually competing, they're just making all the guesses for both players and trying to be even-handed about it. And if that sounds fun to you, it probably will be. However, the 2-player variant, in my opinion, has no reason to exist anymore because, we'll get to it in a bit. Speaking of large gatherings, at the time of this recording, there are still some very good reasons to not do those. Fortunately, it's even easier to play Codenames over the internet than it is to play the last game that we unpacked. All you have to do is point your web browser over to codenames.game, and unless you're very uncertain around computers, you're good to go. The online implementation created by Czech Games Edition is actually very well done. Remember how I mentioned that Vlado got his start in the world of electronic games? It shows. And that's about it for... Oh, there's other versions, right. Okay, this video is already very long, so I won't spend too much time on this, but here goes. Much like the movie industry, the tabletop games industry is driven by big hits. Only about 1 published game out of 10 makes any real money, and only a tiny percentage become really successful. So when a big hit does come along, you can expect its publisher to start cranking out sequels and expansion sets and alternate versions and deluxe editions and so on, for as long as they can stay profitable. Codenames is no exception. The most notable version, in my opinion, is Codenames Duet. So remember before when I said you shouldn't bother with the 2-player variant in the original game? This right here is the reason for why. It's 2 players only, and it's fully cooperative, meaning that either you both win together or you both lose together. The game itself is your opponent. Both of you are going to take turns providing clues, and both of you are going to take turns guessing. You set up your 25 words, just like in the original, and the grid cards are double-sided, so that one player can only see this side, while the other player can only see that side. The words that look green on your side of the card, you're trying to help your teammate find those. The blank ones, bystanders, just like in the original game. But there are not 1, not 2, but 3 assassins who will kill your partner dead if they touch them. So while you don't have to worry about giving points to the opposing team, because there is no opposing team, you do have to be extra cautious about those assassins. This means that when you're given the clues, you only really have to watch out for 3 problem words instead of 8 or 9, which does give a clearer focus. And remember, the 2 sides of the grid card are different. The ones that look green to you might be bystanders or even killers on your teammate's side of the card. Any given word on the table could be green for both of you, or green for you but not them, or even an assassin who will kill you if you touch it, but a green card if your teammate touches it. You can see on the card what happens if your teammate touches any of these cards, and they can see on the card what happens to you if you touch them, but the only way you can communicate any of this is through those same 1-word clues that you used in the original game. It's really clever. As with the original game, your turn ends when you make a wrong guess or when you decide to stop guessing. Then you switch roles, and the one who gave the last clue now receives a clue from their teammate and starts making guesses of their own. If you can get all of these green cards onto the table, you win. But you have to avoid those assassins, and you've only got a certain number of clues to get it all done. If you've used up all your clues and there are still words left that you need to find, there's this really tense sudden death round where you no longer take turns or give clues, but either player can just touch a word to guess it. And you can go as long as you want, but one wrong guess and you've lost. You can adjust the difficulty level to easy, medium, or hard depending on how challenging you want the game to be. And there's even this weird sort of campaign format where you play a series of games that are supposed to represent traveling to all these different global locations, and they have different parameters involving how many wrong guesses you're allowed to make compared to how many times you're allowed to just end your turn voluntarily. Now, I've never actually heard from somebody who played through in this mode, but it's pretty cool that it's there in the box. Then there's Codenames Pictures, which is exactly what it sounds like. Same game, but the cards on the table have pictures on them instead of words. The art style is really striking, and a lot of people find the images are evocative of a lot of different things, though not everybody feels that way. See, Codenames Pictures is kind of divisive, much more so than the original game. A lot of people prefer it to the original, and a lot of people really don't. Here's the case for each side. So first pro. The language barrier, which as I mentioned is a problem for almost all party games, is less of an issue here. As long as the team leaders share a common language with each player on their team so they can all understand the clues, it can sort of work. Although it can get tricky if not all the team members share a language in common with one another, because you're still going to need a way to provide that clue in two different languages, which will probably convey more information than just giving a single word in a single language. Also, part of the challenge of Codenames is listening to the clues received by the other team, because if you can figure out which words belong to them, you know most of the words you need to avoid. If the other team is speaking in a language you're not fluent with, then they have an advantage. Still, it's easier to deal with the language barrier in the pictures version than in the original version. The grids are smaller, 4x5 instead of 5x5, which makes for shorter games with fewer neutral gray cards. A lot of people find the pictures easier to describe and refer to than words. For them, it's not only quicker and quirkier, it's easier to play it well, especially as a team leader. Some of the people who are too anxious to enjoy Codenames might have an easier time with Codenames Pictures. Also, the pictures are just super weird and just kind of fun to look at. I mean, look at these things. And now the cons. For a more literal-minded player, the pictures here just aren't as evocative as the words from the original. But you see the word princess, for example, and it just brings up a whole world of memories and feelings and colors and textures and stories and everything associated with all of these. Then they see this, and it's two bowling pins with a bomb, or it's a cherub with a scythe. Usually it's two things that have nothing to do with each other, jammed together somehow. So you can see how, for language-minded players, it can be hard for them to come up with a clue for more than one of these things, and that can really sink the game if they end up being team leader. Also, the other kind of person who doesn't like the original Codenames, the kind who needs something that's crunchier and more substantial as far as mechanisms or narrative, they're going to like this even less. So, which version should you bring to the table? When you've got a large group, especially one that consists partly of players who are in it for entertainment more than for engagement, the key isn't to bring a game that a few people absolutely love, but rather a game that nobody absolutely hates. When you're choosing between these two versions, the question isn't which one will the group like more, broadly speaking, but is there anybody in the group who will really dislike one of these? Whichever one of these games will result in the least amount of silently staring at the table, that's the one you want to bring. And then there are the licensed versions. There's the Disney one and the Marvel one, Simpsons, probably others. There's always another one coming. And, they're fine. The Marvel and the Disney one have word cards and picture cards, so you can go either way, or have a mix of both if you want. Thing is, though, even if you use the pictures, it creates a new kind of language barrier, a culture barrier. The players all have to be very familiar with whatever the subject is, otherwise you're going to get very stuck trying to think of a clue for this, or this, or this. Now, it's fine as long as everyone at the table is fluent in this language, but it's a total bust if they're not. And then there's Codenames Deep Undercover, because these days everything that markets itself as a party game has to have an adult version that comes in a black box with a sans serif text on it for some reason, which I'm not going to go into right at the moment because this video is already really long and also because I'm really tired and I don't feel like it. Short version, if you played the original game and you liked it and you think you'd enjoy this version too, you're probably right. And that'll do it for our latest Unpacking. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. It may seem a little bit weird to do a new video about a game from back in 2015, but Codenames is still popular today, and I hope you found this conversation useful, not only for what it has to say about this particular title, but also more broadly speaking, as sort of an examination of different perspectives on party games. This is something I feel is kind of missing from the world of tabletop game videos, and it's one of the main reasons for this channel's existence. And speaking of which, if you think it's good that this channel exists, you should definitely do the like, sub, ding things, if you haven't already. And if you're in a position to help us build this channel, I would really appreciate if you could point your web browser over to patreon.com/JoanTheGamesMistress, where you can get some really neat rewards by helping us to make this channel our livelihood. And if you'd like some help in setting up a game night or setting up a role-playing campaign, you can get a personal consultation over at JoanTheGamesMistress.com. I hope all your holidays are safe and happy, and I hope you have a chance to get in plenty of playtime. Let me know how it goes in the comments, especially if Codenames hits the table. But remember, mean comments get deleted and mean people get banned, so play nice. Your turn.